the video that I shot previously was done about 3 years ago before going to treatment, and it's been 3 years, and I've got a month and a half sober right now, and so you don't need to be good at arithmetic to figure out the things that I've been trying haven't been working, and and so I don't know. I've had this idea for a long time that I wanted to, I don't know, find something new. I've done all that. Like I've been to treatment 25 times. I've been to treatment, and again, I have a month and a half sober. And I've tried all the classic modalities of getting sober that treatment centers offer, at least here in Canada and BC. 12-step is the big one, and it's worked for a while. I have my, I don't want to bad talk or bad mouth, the 12-step program, because I've met a lot of really good people in them and built some really good relationships. And I have had some successes as well working that program. But for me, it hasn't worked in the long term for whatever reason. Could be me, could just be my fault. Didn't try it hard enough, whatever it is. I find myself here now. There was a ceiling in most of those. So I've done, 12-step, I've done talk therapy, I've done like medication. So what do you call that? Harm reduction. I've tried that. And I always just felt like there was just a ceiling that I would hit. And I would just, at some point, it would really feel inauthentic. You know what I mean? It would feel like I'm pretending to be this person and I'm getting well when, truthfully, I don't really think I was, I had hit a ceiling and I wasn't going to go past the ceiling. And to me, it wasn't enough. I felt like if I was going to attach myself to anything that I could get clean from, that would change my life, that would make me not want to kill myself, basically, which is what I guess I've been trying to do with drugs and alcohol for a long time. It needed to be something, there needed to be something more, so yeah, so I have this idea that I would kind of like, I'm 48 now. I've been doing this a long time. Really, what do I have left to lose? Do you know what I mean? Like, why not, more for myself, I'll be honest, but why not become a guinea pig, traveling into these other avenues of recovery that are either emerging or, on the fringe, or, are really not talked about. There's no content available about this stuff, and so that's what I'm going to do. Like I can say that I haven't come across addiction, honestly. Like some people, or addiction stuff. I'm getting tired of the word addiction, to be honest. It just doesn't jive with me. I prefer substance abuse problem now. Whatever, I put in the work, I can say whatever I want, right? So I have not come across substance abuse problems, honestly. What I'm trying to say is I like the feeling of drugs. I love it. They feel fantastic. Namely cocaine, alcohol. Those are my loves of my life, I guess you could say, some sad way. I did not get into an accident and get prescribed Oxycontin, and then that turned into a habit, that turned into fentanyl, that turned into whatever. Like I drank and used cocaine because I love the feeling. It made me feel like kind of normal in the beginning, and then things become very unnormal after a while. But I love the feeling of it, and so I can't say that there was like an incident in my life that I would ever think about, or like something happened and then I was like, oh, because of this, because of that person, I need to get high. No, I just like, at one point throughout however many journeys I've had trying to get clean for a long period of time, at one point I find myself like, that's the answer, So at some point, stress related, maybe, who knows, man, all types of stuff, loneliness, I guess, lack of family, there's a variety of reasons, right? But yeah, I can't say that there's a specific reason. And so I don't know, I'm really interested in I guess trying these other modalities that help bring out who I am, what's going on for me, what resonates with me, and maybe I can help some other people, or at least relate to them, because I know probably thousands of people that are in and out of addiction and have the same issues and have had the same struggles and are searching for meaning as well too, right? And I don't know, like in my life, I've been sober longer than I've used drugs in my life. Like I guess what you could call a binge user. And so, I'll get clean for, a long period of time, and then I'll binge and I'll go off for, between days to weeks. And in those times that I'm sober, I feel maybe it's God given, universal given, that I have all these amazing qualities and these abilities. And like I pour myself into these things, these passions that I'm interested in, and I have great success. Like I really do. But eventually at some point, it's not enough, man. Or maybe it's enough, but it's there's something missing, and I decided to pick up and then fucking burn it down and then restart. I'm a really good underdog. Consistency with that hasn't been part of my story. Something that happened recently is that okay, so I had 7 months recently, sober, clean, whatever you want to call it, and that thought came into my head that it would be a really good idea to pick up crack, and it's crazy, and anyway, so that's what I did, and then for a number of days I was awake, 7 or 8 days, something like that, and was doing all kinds of weird stuff, crazy stuff, and eventually, found myself. I overdosed. I had a seizure, and I woke up on my crack dealer's couch, and I looked outside to the backyard where we had been using, and her glass table. Her glass table was smashed and she was crying. I made a crack dealer cry, so check. And and I don't know what happened. Like I'd taken the drug in the way that I took it, and I remember feeling this panic feeling coming on, and that's it. And I asked her what had happened after, and she said, "You had a seizure and you smashed through the table," and it was really terrifying for her, but anyway, shitty as that is for her, me as well, I guess. But yeah, when I opened my eyes on that couch and I looked out and I saw what had happened, and the feeling of like wanting to use again was gone, so I don't know if there's been some sort of like divine intervention, or if maybe I just hit, a limit for now, possibly. But I just knew what I was done. I gave her my drugs and caught an Uber out of there. And anyway, so I've been kind of riding on that experience now for a month and a half, and a lot has happened actually in this last month and a half, which is pretty cool. I feel changed in a way already just from that experience. If I'm being honest, I feel calmer. I feel like, I've had this sense of urgency every time I've gotten sober, like I guess my whole life, that I needed to build this, like I've lost time, right? So I need to build this thing up and become this person and fucking, show the world or whatever. And I don't have that now. I kind of feel calmer and more relaxed, and I'm allowing things to come naturally, and it feels authentic. And so I really want to stick with that feeling. And something that has been like lingering in the background for a very long time is for me to, pursue my passions. One, which is creating videos, and if I can meld that into a way for me to get clean for the rest of my life, and for me also to help people, I mean, that's a pretty good story. I'm pretty satisfied with that outcome. So that's the game plan. Yeah, I'm really good at getting clean. I'm really bad at staying clean. And that's the point. Like the whole point of this, it's kind of self-serving in a little way. I do plan on, maybe if this, if I find things that work for me, I do plan on, you know, creating this channel that helps other people go through a process of change that, can help them as well too. Um, but my main goal is is to find things that work for me, that fill in all the, I don't know, the areas of Neil, or the areas of whatever I am, whatever, this human being that I am, that fulfill me, that um, yeah, that brings me to a place that I love myself enough, or care about myself, I should say. Uh, that Yeah, that fills me up enough to not like want to make those choices that burn myself down and burn my life down and hurt people around me. There's a few ideas that I have for avenues of recovery that I'm interested in. Um, One of them is meditation. I feel like I have an extremely active mind that has me scattered a lot of times, sends me in different directions, and I get started on tasks, and you know the classic ADHD, uh, whatever, however they classify that, right? And I'm not necessarily convinced that that's what's going on for me, um, but it would be really good to be able to quiet my mind. And in those moments, that I feel like I want to pick up, I would like to be able to draw on something like that to to move through them or move past them. I'm also kind of interested in psychedelics in a way. I've had my experiences in the past with psychedelics, psilocybin and LSD years ago, and it's been a while since I've used those, but I've seen some really interesting information coming out recently about psilocybin and ibogaine, actually mainly ibogaine, and yeah, I just watched this really cool documentary recently about it, and about some guys that have some similar things that are going on for me, I think, and have had um, some pretty amazing outcomes from that, transformations, I should say. So at times I just feel like that everything that I'm doing and all these activities that I have that are going on, it just feels inauthentic. Do you know what I mean? And like I don't like that feeling. Like I want to feel like I'm living a genuine life as myself. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel like an actor, trying to be this person. And I feel like that's happened a lot of times. And maybe you guys can clinically diagnose me. That may be some sort of mental illness that I have. God knows, probably have a couple, um, but that's what happens. At some point, it just doesn't feel like enough, and so something's missing. And it's time for a change. Like, it's time for a change. Yeah, stay tuned. See what happens.